When we first heard about Disney and Pixar's Onward, we were immediately excited about the connection the story had to role-playing games. After talking with the film's director, Dan Scanlon, and getting to see the film for ourselves, it only made sense to us that we had to find a way to take Barley's copy of the Quests of Yore game off the screen and into real life. We worked with Dan and his team directly to get all the details just right and to try to create this immersive experience for fans to further explore the Onward universe and really dive deeper into this world. I'm Pat Marino, the game design manager at the Op, and I'm very excited to be with Dan today to talk more about the project. So,
Hey,
hey, so to start things off, Dan, I'm really curious. Onward's a very personal film for you, right? So, what inspired Quests of Yore, the tabletop game, within the film?
Well, Onward is a modern fantasy world, and so in it is a fantasy quest, but we have the ability to do a modern take on that. And we thought, well, it would probably be role-playing games like there are in our world, but this would be a really cool way for Barley and Ian to get their knowledge of quests and magic. And even in the research, some of the original role-playing games made in our world were based on historical battles and wars. And we thought, how cool that in the Onward world, where all these quests and all this magic actually really happened, these role-playing games would be historically accurate. They would be their history. And of course, that's how the boys would learn how to do magic and how to go on adventures.
Yeah, and that was certainly a really cool thing to see, even in the trailers, like how this very familiar, at least, among our gamer community, elements of these games was there. There was cards, there was a player book and all these different things. And kind of thinking about that and how the game appears on screen and how it is in the film. And what was sort of your vision in terms of how we took all of those references and pulled them out of the screen to make sort of this artifact, right, from this universe exist in our world?
Well, you're right. I mean, I think what we all wanted to do was make the game from the movie exist and be real. How fun to be able to actually have essentially Barley's copy of the game and see some of the things that you saw in the movie, but then go deeper and see new magic cards, new creatures, new adventures, and how fun to learn more about the lore and the background and the history of the world of Onward by having a game you can actually play.
Well, you mentioned the history, right? And that's one of the things that we looked at a lot in crafting this game. Fans may not know yet, because the game is still forthcoming, that the game actually takes place in a different timeline from the film. So this is, hundreds of years before Ian and Barley first, went to school and had their adventure and did everything that they did in the film. And so in kind of doing that, what were the messages or the core themes and things that you wanted to make sure still brought the Onward universe to life and felt authentic, even though we're in this different timeline and we have some different story going on?
As you said, it is so fun to get to go back, 800 some years to the Manicore's heyday and really live in the world of the opening of the movie, where you saw actual quests and actual magic occurring. But it was important that the game really espouse the things that Barley learned from it. You get the idea in the movie that Barley's whole code of ethics and his words to live by all came from things he learned in the game. So it was important for us when we were making the game to make sure that that it taught the players those very things, to trust your gut, to not take the easy road, to use what you have. And then I think the most important thing for us in working on the game was, the most important thing that Barley does in the movie is that he supports his brother and encourages his brother. And so it was important to us that the game also do that it also really inspire people to encourage and support each other as they play.
Yeah, it's definitely a fun aspect of working on this project, right? Is both using Barley's voice, and I really like how the game is not just any copy of Quests of Yore. This is Barley's copy. It's got his notes and his little nudges to encourage you to get into character, to take some risks, to really play in this universe and not be bound by, well, are we playing it exactly right? And I think that's an interesting aspect that people don't always know about role-playing games if you haven't played one before. Is there's an element of improv, right? You never know what the players are going to do if you're the quest master, and you have to be able to adapt to the way that they want to sort of experience the story in the quest. And I've really come to appreciate how we've been able to figure out how Barley is sort of that voice of sometimes things will go a little off from what you thought, but like here's how you roll with it and make this experience your own and kind of adapt to it. So his voice is still in the game, even though he's not in the story of the game, right? And that adventure.
And it was fun to get to write him again. From a character point of view, he's such a fun character, and I think, like you said, a fun way to get him and his voice into the game, even though the game takes place long ago.
Yeah, I felt like as you know, even as I was proofing different things and looking through where his comments are, it's hard not to hear Chris Pratt's voice in your head, reading those lines in character and sort of bringing that to life. And it really does have that authentic feel to it. And that's what I was like really fun about working with you and your team, is that, those nudges of like, well, Barley would say it a little bit more this way, or let's capture his messaging in this different direction. And kind of to that point is he's not the only character from the film whose voice is in this game. So we've got the Manticore, who was alive and adventuring at this time as well. Tell me a little bit though about like your thoughts on, and I know we've discussed as we've done some of the revision in the story, but like how the Manticore appears in the game, or what fans can expect of her in Quests of Yore versus her character on the screen and Onward.
Well, it was so fun to work with you all and write Manticore again as well. She's such a great character that I love so much from the movie. And it's nice that now she gets a lot of time and she really gets to lead the adventure and we get to do more with her. But it is her in her heyday. And so it's more of the side of her we see after she loses it at the tavern and is really speaking as a hero and a warrior, and almost with a little bit of arrogance, which I love. And so fun to have her come along on the adventure. And, it's also her, like I was saying, in the midst of her classic warrior days. We wrote a comic book, Riko Tamaki and I, that kicked off, also took place long ago in the Manticore's early days. And I think it's a good thing to read before reading and playing the game, because you guys really took the information from the comic and then took it further. It's almost as if the game takes place right after the comic, and used characters from that comic too in the game. So there's really an opportunity for really tracking a lot of this history. So it was just fun to write her again and to learn from her, to have the players learn from the best, I think is also a really fun part of the game.
Yeah, for sure. And I remember coming up to the Pixar campus and us sitting around and talking about some of the story beats and things like that and where this was going to go. And realizing that like beyond what we'd seen in storyboard and in early film and in the comic, there was more ideas and lore and depth that went into the creation of this overall story and film, and how all of that really gave us some context and some deeper knowledge and lore to build story for the game. And so working with the writers that we had for this game, who have some experience in the RPG space and have written in this kind of thing before, and helping them see like, oh, okay, there's Onward on the screen, and then there's all of this lore sort of behind what in this time period is the fractured realms, and what the characters wouldn't do in that time, and what the values were. I thought that was really great. Another concept in the game I wanted to talk a little bit about is what eventually became Lion's Will, and this idea of both the messaging of the story and the mechanic coming together to create this idea of Lion's Will. Tell me a little bit more about your thoughts on that, like where that came from and how it evolved.
We want to make sure that the player's experience is in some ways similar to Ian's experience, learning these lessons about confidence and about taking risks, about stepping out of your comfort zone and putting yourself out there. That was really important to me in the early days, that the game give players that experience. And Lion's Will was a way to, similar to what Ian has to do when he's casting spells, he really has to, again, challenge himself, take risks, do things he's not comfortable with, do things that he may be too shy to do or doesn't believe in himself enough to do. And we wanted to have players do that too, have them, in order for spells to work, we wanted them to, have to do something that is fun or embarrassing or out of their comfort zone, because I think you'd just be surprised of what you're capable of if you challenge yourself. And it also helps you bond with the people playing the game with you, and they get to know you better and you get to know them better. So we wanted a way to make that possible. We wanted a way that magic would only work if if you did these things, if you sang a song before you cast a spell or something. And Lion's Will was really born out of that. It's very similar to Heart's Fire, which is also a part of the game, but we wanted to go deeper. We know about Heart's Fire. We also wanted to learn more things. And I always feel like both Heart's Fire and Lion's Will, the thing that I used as a test when you were all pitching ideas of what people might have to do in order to cast a spell, I would just ask myself, would I not want to do that? I would not want to do that. Okay, that's perfect. Because I'm like Ian, I'm a sort of a shy, introverted person, but I love that a good game can make you step out of that comfort zone.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. We've, of course, been doing a lot of testing of the game and playing through it. And we have one test group in particular that's gone through the whole story and had the whole adventure. And when we started and these things would come up, sort of the group would look to me as the quest master and say, okay, like what are they going to have to do? And there was that moment of like collective almost hesitation of like, oh, I'm glad I'm not the one that's going to have to do this. and as we went through the quests, and there's the prelude and then 11 quests in this box, so there's a lot of content there. I saw the group kind of evolve to, before I could come up with something, the other players were like relishing the opportunity to say, you know what you should do to really earn that reroll or to earn that opportunity to do this thing. And we really ended up with some great memorable moments. And one that comes to mind is we had a player playing the Cyclops Wizard and another playing Unora, who's the gnome bard kind of character that we have as a pre-generated character. And the Cyclops wanted to carry the gnome across a river, basically. And it was like, okay, they failed their roll, so they wanted a chance to use Lion's Will to try it again. And okay, you're carrying this thing. And the challenge that came up with was basically recreating this action by like walking across things in their house while carrying a cat on their shoulders as if it was the gnome, and kind of going through this whole like reenactment of the scene.
And they have to literally do that. Like they have to pick up their cat and walk around, right?
Yeah, and of course, we were social distancing. We were playing over Zoom, but it's like I'm sitting there going, "Where's the record button? This one we need to save." So,
yeah, it's cool that group of people probably know each other better now, because they've had to get out of their comfort zone a little bit.
Yeah, and it's always interesting to see how that's different for each player, right? As the groups come together, sometimes it's acting out a thing is hard for some people, and for others it's very easy. But then asking them to share something personal or kind of be emotionally vulnerable rather than sort of theatrical can be just as challenging. And finding that balance for different players has been really fun.
I mean, it's so much of the experience that we do at Pixar when we're writing stories is we share our personal stories. We and I'm sure you're all doing too, when you're pitching ideas for the game, you're getting up and saying, what if we did this? And sometimes it doesn't go well and it's a little embarrassing. And boy, by the end, you're so bonded from putting yourselves out there. And I think that's what's important about this in the game and does emulate the feeling of the movie and the feeling of having gone on a quest together.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that, because like being up at the Pixar campus and seeing all of the folks, together from the Pixar team who worked on Onward, and having some of those conversations and seeing that idea generation and the back and forth, is very evident, right? That there's this bond there around this story and this universe, and sort of this willingness to throw ideas out, and then for the group to constructively shape and mold them, or say like, oh, well, then maybe not that, but what if we go over here, and seeing how those things ultimately influenced the story of the game and the direction it went, not only from sort of the quest story you play through, but also the functionality of the game. And of course, seeing some RPG experience and gamer experience among that team helped really craft some of the gameplay for us, and helped us kind of hone that in to make not just a role-playing game set in this universe, but a role-playing game that embraces this universe, which was, I think, for us, one of the most exciting parts of it is, getting to go deeper in and create something new and write some new story within an existing IP that people know, and with the folks who have the passion and were behind it.
And what was nice is you were able to add more danger than I think there is in the movie at times, because the movie takes place in the modern fantasy world where people are civilized. So it was frankly hard for us to find stakes. And what I love about the game and what your team did is it's the old world, it's not a civilized place. It's not New Mushroomton. It's just Mushroomton at this point. And there's creatures and there's people that want to do harm. So the game is has a lot of stakes and a lot of danger. But then the other thing that was fun with working with you and our team working with you is how, as time went on, your team really got a sense of humor that has to be in Onward too. You know what I mean? As well, because even though it doesn't have the modern twist on it and the humor that comes with the modern twist, it still has a modern sense of humor. Even though there's no technology in the game, it was important for all of us that it still make you laugh, that it still feel like not just any other game. It still feels like, oh, this is Onward, so there's going to be something funny about these characters. And it was fun to watch the team and work with the team coming up with new characters and new experiences that were funny.
Yeah, I know for me, and obviously I worked on the mechanical development of the game and making sure everything functioned and the testing and the proofing and those kinds of aspects. But each time the writers would send in like, okay, here's the new quest. It's like, okay, drop whatever else I'm doing because I got to read this and see what the characters are. And then I was picturing our playtest groups, like, how are they going to encounter these characters? What are they going to think? And there's a couple that I don't want to spoil, but there were a couple moments where I'm like, oh, they're going to love this character, and thinking ahead that like the game sort of has an out for like, no, you can't bring this person with you. We know you're going to love them. We know you're going to think they're really funny or engaging, but they're not really going to join your party and go on your quest. They're part of this scene and this thing, but it really did come to life in that way that they're like, oh, well, can we get this character to just be part of our group forever? And it's like, well, can we maybe, but trying to figure those things out. And even several quests later, they're still like making references back to those characters or those moments and like, oh yeah, remember when we encountered that person, or we should go back and visit and make sure that they're okay. And so it has those danger moments with the enemies and things, but some of the sort of non-player character friends or allies or people who help advance the story create these little memorable moments that I think is really funny to see how they come to life and are sort of like almost fan favorites right among the story and how that all came together.
Yeah, totally.
So, I've talked a little bit about our testing, and of course, that's a big part of what we do, but we got a chance to play a little bit up at the Pixar office. I'm just wondering, like, what stands out from you from being able to drop into some of that testing with the team and seeing the game in action? Any memorable moments or favorite bits from that?
Yeah, it was so fun. I mean, we were getting started on the game when we were finishing up the movie, so I didn't get to play because I didn't have enough time, but I got to drop in and watch you all playing with Louise Smythe and Austin Madison, who are story artists on Onward that you mentioned earlier, and they really know tabletop games and RPG games, and they were our authorities on the movie, and now they were working with all of you who are the authorities of authorities, and so it was fun to come in, and the minute I walked in, everyone was laughing. I didn't know what they had been doing. They were midway through, and it was just fun to see how much humor and how much fun this group of people were having, and they didn't even know your team all that well at that point, but you'd think they'd been friends forever because it just immediately creates this bond. And again, I think that what I love about RPG games is as you mentioned, the improvise quality, the improvisation, but the storytelling, and the storytelling that has to happen on the fly amongst everyone playing is so exciting and so refreshing in a time when every toy plays for you and every game tells you exactly what's happening. It's just fun for people to get to make stuff up and make up characters. And, that's what I loved about watching the game be played.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, is the creation of characters, right, and story collectively is something that an RPG does that not every game can offer, right? Some games are very much, there's a structured rule set and you play with those characters in it. And we've provided the 4 pre-generated characters that come in the box. You can just pick up and start playing, and they have some good backstory that you can add depth to and all of that. And I've seen people really embrace those characters, and then I've seen people create characters of their own to play, which this game also allows you to do, is sort of, pick that you want to play merfolk and you want them to be a savant and specialize in magic and kind of go down that road and experiment with that. And seeing some of our test groups where you just give them that, like, okay, we're just going to walk through the steps. And it starts out as sort of a technical exercise, right? Of like, do you want this skill or that skill? And by the end of it, not only do they have these like robust backstories they've created for themselves with their own like sort of Pixar humor, I think, infused into it, because people know what they're getting into with this type of game. Or the way the intro is set up kind of walks them into that. And then seeing them sort of, adding these little notes of like, well, this character also, like we have one character who is a mermaid character, which the mermaids in the game are allowed to use magic to transform and have legs. And you have sort of a little mermaid element there.
Yeah.
And so there was like, the next thing we know that it was a redheaded mermaid who's fascinated by shoes, because when she has legs, she gets to wear shoes. And this is a big deal. And you get that kind of a running joke that keeps coming up in the story of like, okay, you knocked out this adversary, and the first question is, what kind of shoes are they wearing?
Yeah.
It's like not
That's
not
great.
ones you want to steal, but okay, let's think
Sure.
about that. And but then also always circling back to like, well, what would a hero do in this situation, right?
Right.
Is what is that moral lesson under it? Is it, well, you had to knock the adversary out to get to the helping aspect of the quest, but you wouldn't rob them too, would you? And being able to have some of those conversations, which is something I hope like some families and things are able to have that experience playing with kids is, what's the deeper messaging of the story you're creating together, and what's the right thing to do in a situation and why. And I've even seen some players who it's like, a fight starts because there's danger in the game, and they're like, oh, but I don't want to hurt
Yeah.
people. Like, can we trick them just to get away from this, or like, what's the alternative? And trying to look at those things, which is kind of fun to see too. And then you have other players who are, full barbarian of like, okay, I've got my weapons, let's go, and they're kind of in that manticore mindset and seeing all those different elements.
Well, I mean, and you mentioned this earlier that the game comes with pre-generated characters, or you can make them up. And one of the things that I loved about the way that the game, that your team crafted the game, was because I don't know a lot about tabletop games and I haven't played a lot myself, it was helpful that there's an entry level point for much younger or inexperienced players that even I could follow, and that also it could be played by experts, people who've played tons of games. You know what I mean? I think that's really exciting too. You can come at it from any different place and make it the game you want it to be. And then again, as you were saying with the lessons of it, Onward is really this story of a parental figure and someone who's trying to teach someone about life. And so I love that the game plays that role too. So much of the movie is about those surrogate parents in our life and those lessons we learn from different places. So I think it works well in the game.
Well, I feel like that's something we really took away too from the meetings we had together and working on this game is learning more about how to craft not just story but message, right, and into a gameplay scenario. We've worked on a lot of IP-based games, and that's a space we play in a lot, is bringing story to life. And I feel like being able to work with you and the Pixar team in general is getting to that deeper thing that Pixar does so well in film, is not just story, but story with message and meaning that goes very deep beneath it, and figuring out, how do we make a game that does that? Right. It's just okay, we had a story in it and the story was engaging and we did some actions, but sort of pushing people to understand the meaning or purpose behind those actions and to have those growth elements and things. I think it's something that makes this really unique. As you said, part of our goal from the start was, how do we make this approachable, right, for folks who've never played an RPG before, maybe haven't played more than the most commonly known board games, but love the film and want to get into it. And part of that was Barley's voice, is the guiding nudge of, you can do this. There's a lot to explain in terms of a rule book that accounts for every sideways thing your players might do. But at the core of the game, it's, describe your action. Okay, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to shoot my bow and arrow and try to knock that vase off the fence. Okay, well, how are you approaching that action? What technique are you using? And is anything helping you with it? Well, I'm going to do it bravely. I'm aiming because it's my bow and arrow, and I'm using my bow and arrow. There's your 3 dice you get to roll. Let's figure out if it worked. That's the game in a nutshell. Mm-hmm. And yet within that core structure, because we had all of the storytelling, and we had Austin giving input, and we had Louise giving input, and your input as well. And it's like, it takes that mechanic, which is in and of itself, it's math basically, but it weaves it into this whole experience that players get to have, where it starts off of, if you read your kids a book at bedtime, and you've improvised a voice or made up part of the story, you've basically played Quests of Yore, right? And we just added some dice to that experience. And so that's something I hope that people will embrace. And I've found, even with all the games I've played, I've never before this project been a dungeon master or a quest master for a role-playing game. I've played them, but I've never been behind the screen, so to speak. So this was my first foray. And I found, like, I started off with, like, I'm sticking to what's in the book. And by the end, I'm like, I can improvise here. I can adapt the story to fit what the characters are doing. And I'm hoping others have that experience as well, that each group that plays Quests of Yore is going to be able to walk away with the same story, but their own twists and takes on it. And that maybe some groups will say, oh, I remember when this happened. And another group will say, that didn't happen. That'll be a unique thing that they didn't realize was sort of inspired by the story in the text, but also created by that group.
That's awesome. I love that.
So, kind of thinking about when the game releases later this year, like what do you hope are the key takeaways for people playing?
Well, again, I think I hope it's what Ian took away from the movie, and obviously what Barley took away from playing the game. Um, that as we talked about, that they learn to come out of their shell a little bit, that they get a little more confident trying things they hadn't done, and that they get to know the people they're playing with. I think that's really important too, because it's a quest, and that's a part of a quest is really getting to know and bond with the people you're playing with. And then on top of that, I think just for fans of the movie, I hope they enjoy going deeper. It was really fun for me. I mean, as you mentioned earlier, our story team, our art department, we all had all these ideas for the movie that couldn't fit in the movie, and and history and details, and to get to add those to the project, and then get to see, how many new characters were added by, by the team making the game. It's just, for me, it's just fun to live in that world again, and go deeper.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, like seeing our writers, Ivan Van Norman and Jameson and Matthew, and like how they brought new elements to it and managed to craft that in a way that fits this universe. Like it makes me hopeful that some fans will do the same, right? Is they'll play through this adventure and then they'll take their own attempt to create some story. I'm selfishly hoping some members of your team maybe write some quests we can explore after the fact too, and dive in and make their own story, because I'd love to see what they come up with. I think that'd be really fun.
Oh yeah, I mean, again, it's a world I have a lot of love for, and I'm so excited that we got to do more with it.
So, kind of closing question, I guess that I would have for you is, what do you think Barley would say about this game?
Well, first, I think Barley would say it's not a game; it is a playbook for life. Barley would be offended that you called it that. Yeah, he would just say that there are life lessons in this, and then he would probably like have one or two historical inaccuracies that he would have issue with, like on page 24 and 138. He'd be like, that's not exactly how that worked, but other than that, it's pretty spot on.
That's great. I can totally picture that.
Yeah.
I think like I always picture him having this game and somewhat the way he did it as a film. It's like both sacred artifact and well-worn collectible.
Yeah.
Like it has this reverence, but the version that we've created and sort of what you see in the film is like it's also well loved, right? Like some of these cards have art that shows Cheeto stains and duct tape and his own stickers and touch on it. It's like it's that mix of like seeing that importance in the life lessons in the game, but also not being afraid to embrace it, customize it, own it, and use it. And I think that kind of messaging is really cool. And that for me was like an element of Barley, right? Is like, this thing is important, but like, don't be afraid of it either because of its importance. Right. Yeah.
And don't be afraid to change it and to, yeah, that's great.
Well, I think that was all the questions I had to discuss today. I really appreciate you taking the time and getting to talk with you even more about the project and the game and picking your brain a little bit about the Onward universe. It's been a lot of fun.
Oh, it was just such a joy to get to do this with both our teams coming together and going deeper. I loved getting to work on it and getting to live in that world again and work on those characters and go even further. And I hope people enjoy it too. I hope people are doing their own improvised versions of characters. Like you said, I think they're going to have a great time.
Great.